The next time you see the full moon high in the south, look carefully at its right-hand edge and let your eye travel upward along the curve of the disk. Round about 2 o'clock, you'll notice a small, dark oval. It is the Great Walled Plain, one of the finest on the moon, known as the Mare Crisium, the Sea of Crises. 300 miles in diameter and almost completely surrounded by a ring of magnificent mountains, it had never been explored until we entered it in the late summer of 1996. I was geologist, or selenologist if you want to be pedantic, in charge of the group exploring the southern region of the Mare. We'd begun our journey early in the slow lunar dawn, and still had almost a week of Earth time before nightfall. One could never grow tired of those incredible mountains, so much more rugged than the gentle hills of Earth. We never knew as we rounded the capes and promontories of that vanished sea what new splendors would be revealed to us. The whole southern curve of the Mare Crisium is a vast delta where a score of rivers once found their way into the ocean. Each of these ancient valleys was an invitation, challenging us to climb into the unknown uplands beyond. But we had 100 miles still to cover, could only look longingly at the heights which others must scale. It was my turn to prepare breakfast in the corner of the main cabin that served as a galley. I can remember that moment quite vividly after all these years. As I stood by the frying pan, waiting like any terrestrial housewife for the sausages to brown, I let my gaze wander idly over the mountain walls which covered the whole of the southern horizon. My eye caught a metallic glitter, high on the ridge of a great promontory, thrusting out into the sea 30 miles to the west. It was a dimensionless point of light, as if a star had been clawed from the sky by one of those cruel peaks. I was curious to know what kind of rock could be shining so brightly up there, and I climbed into the observation turret and swung our 4-inch telescope round to the west. I could see just enough to tantalize me. Clear and sharp in the field of vision, the mountain peaks seemed only half a mile away, but whatever was catching the sunlight was still too small to be resolved. Yet it seemed to have an elusive symmetry, and the summit upon which it rested was curiously flat. All that morning we argued our way across the Mare Crisium. It was absolutely certain, my companions argued, that there had never been any form of intelligent life on the moon. I knew that as well as anyone. But there are times when a scientist must not be afraid to make a fool of himself. Listen, I'm going up there, if only for my own peace of mind. I've always wanted to go up into those hills anyway, and this gives me an excellent excuse. If you don't break your neck, said Garnet, you'll be the laughing stock of the expedition when we get back to base. That mountain'll probably be called Wilson's Folly from now on. We went to bed early that night, after driving the tractor to within half a mile of the promontory. Garnet was coming with me in the morning. He was a good climber and had often been with me on such exploits before. To anyone with a good head for heights, climbing is easy on a world where all weights are only a sixth of their normal value. Inside our suits it was comfortably cool, for the refrigeration units were fighting the fierce sun and carrying away the body heat of our exertions. We seldom spoke to each other, except to pass climbing instructions and to discuss the best plan of ascent. I don't think I was particularly excited when I saw in front of us the wall of rock I'd first inspected through the telescope from 30 miles away. It would level off about 50 feet above our heads, and there on the plateau would be the thing that had lured me over these barren wastes. There were no handholds on the rock face, and we had to use a grapnel. My tired arms seemed to gain new strength as I swung the 3-pronged metal anchor round my head and sent it sailing up toward the stars. The first time it broke loose and came falling slowly back when we pulled the rope. On the third attempt, the prongs gripped firmly, and our combined weights could not shift it. Slowly, taking my time, I began the final ascent. At the rim, I paused and waved to my companion, and then I scrambled over the edge and stood upright, staring ahead of me. I was standing on a plateau perhaps 100 feet across. It had been leveled to support a glittering, roughly pyramidal structure twice as high as a man that was set in the rock like a gigantic, many-faceted jewel. I felt a great lifting of my heart and a strange, inexpressible joy. The old, discredited dream of the first explorers was true. There had, after all, been a lunar civilization, and I was the first to find it. Was this a building? A shrine? Or something for which my language had no name? If a building, then why was it erected in so uniquely inaccessible a spot? I wondered if it might be a temple, and I could picture the adepts of some strange priesthood calling on their gods to preserve them as the life of the moon ebbed with the dying oceans, and calling on their gods in vain. I took a dozen steps forward to examine the thing more closely, but some sense of caution kept me from going too near. Because of the thing's smallness, it did not occur to me I might be looking at the handiwork of a race more advanced than my own. The idea that the moon had possessed intelligence at all was still almost too tremendous to grasp, and my pride would not let me take the final, humiliating plunge. And then I noticed something that set the scalp crawling at the back of my neck. Something so trivial and so innocent that many would never have noticed it at all. The plateau was coated inches deep with the cosmic dust that is always filtering down upon the surface of any world where there are no winds to disturb it. Yet the dust ended quite abruptly in a wide circle enclosing the little pyramid, as though an invisible wall was protecting it. There was someone shouting in my earphones, and I realized that Garnet had been calling me for some time. I walked unsteadily to the edge of the cliff and signaled him to join me. And then I went back toward that circle in the dust. I picked up a fragment of splintered rock and tossed it gently toward the shining enigma. It seemed to hit a smooth, hemispherical surface and slide gently to the ground. I knew then that I was looking at nothing that could be matched in the antiquity of my own race. This was not a building, but a machine, protecting itself with forces that had challenged eternity. I lifted my eyes toward the crescent earth, and I wondered what her clouds had covered when these unknown builders had finished their work. Don't ask me why I didn't guess the truth sooner. I'd assumed that this crystalline apparition had been built by some race belonging to the moon's remote past. But suddenly, and with overwhelming force, the belief came to me that it was as alien to the moon as I myself. No lunar civilization, whatever its doom, could have left but a single token of its existence. I looked at the shining pyramid again, and the more remote it seemed from anything that had to do with the moon. It has taken us 20 years to crack that invisible shield and to reach the machine inside those crystal walls. What we could not understand, we broke at last with the savage might of atomic power. And now I've seen the fragments of the lovely, glittering thing I found up there on the mountain. They are meaningless. The mechanisms of the pyramid belong to a technology that lies far beyond our horizon, perhaps to the technology of paraphysical forces. The mystery haunts us all the more now that the other planets have been reached, and we know that only Earth has ever been the home of intelligent life in our universe. Nor could any lost civilization of our own world have built that machine, for the thickness of the meteoric dust on the plateau has enabled us to measure its age. It was set there upon its mountain before life had emerged from the seas of Earth. When our world was half its present age, something from the stars swept through the solar system, left this token of its passage, and went again upon its way. Until we destroyed it, that machine was still fulfilling the purpose of its builders. And as to that purpose, here is my guess. Nearly 100,000 million stars are turning in the circle of the Milky Way, and long ago, other races, on the worlds of other suns, must have scaled and passed the heights that we have reached. Think of such civilizations, masters of a universe so young that life as yet had come to only a handful of worlds. They must have searched the star clusters as we have searched the planets. Everywhere there would be worlds, but they would be empty or peopled with crawling, mindless things. Such was our own Earth, when that first ship of the peoples of the dawn came sliding in from the abyss beyond Pluto. Those wanderers must have looked on Earth and guessed that it was the favorite of the sun's children. Here, in the distant future, would be intelligence. But there were countless stars before them still, and they might never come this way again. So they left a sentinel, one of millions they've scattered throughout the universe, watching over all worlds with the promise of life. It was a beacon that down the ages has been patiently signaling the fact that no one had discovered it. Perhaps you understand now why that crystal pyramid was set upon the moon instead of on the Earth. Its builders were not concerned with races still struggling up from savagery. They would be interested in our civilization only if we proved our fitness to survive, by crossing space and so escaping from the Earth, our cradle. That is the challenge that all intelligent races must meet sooner or later. It is a double challenge, for it depends, in turn, upon the conquest of atomic energy, and the last choice between life and death. Once we'd passed that crisis, it was only a matter of time before we found the pyramid and forced it open. Now its signals have ceased, and those whose duty it is will be turning their minds upon Earth. Perhaps they wish to help our infant civilization, but they must be very, very old, and the old are often insanely jealous of the young. I can never look now at the Milky Way without wondering from which of those banked clouds of stars the emissaries are coming. If you'll pardon so commonplace a simile, we have set off the fire alarm and have nothing to do but wait. I do not think we will have to wait for long.